Hello, and welcome to the fifth session of our Med Instead of Meds Walk Kansas Lunch Series. We are so glad that you're joining us today and hope that you continue to stay active with your Walk Kansas teammates and your personal goals. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that K-State Research and Extension is an equal opportunity employer. Therefore, we do not discriminate against anyone. If you have any special requests or concerns that you need addressed to attend our programs, please reach out to us and let us know. Today, we'll be learning about another component of the Med Instead of Meds diet. Sherilyn Jackson, the Northeast Regional Family and Consumer Sciences Specialist, will cover grains, and I will explore some of the delicious Med Instead of Meds recipes that we can start incorporating into our daily routine to increase our whole grain intake. We encourage you to utilize the question and answer or the chat section of this Zoom to ask any questions that you may have. We're all here to learn together. Let's dive in and learn more about grains and the Med Instead of Meds diet. Take it away, Sherilyn.
Great. Welcome, everybody. It's so good to have you today. I'm really delighted to hear that we ranked above the Kansas Garden Hour. That's great, but that's a great program too. So you can utilize recordings from both of these later on. So if anybody's interested in Garden Hour, you can always catch those too in a recorded version. We're going to talk about whole grains today. And just want to, again, welcome you all. And we're going to review a little bit about last week when we talked about eating more vegetables, eating more fruits. And I know that there were a couple of comments in chat about people that have tried some new recipes. So if you've tried any, or if you tried maybe a new fruit or vegetable last week, if you'll put that in the chat, it's always kind of fun to see what people are trying. And of course, we're getting into the season of gardening where all kinds of fresh produce will be available. So it's a great time to explore and add more fruits and vegetables to your diet. Just a brief review of eating the Med way, which we've done each week, and hopefully you'll remember these before too long. Eating lots and lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. Also eating whole grains. Eating beans and legumes, eating fish and seafood at least 2 to 3 times per week. Eating nuts and seeds, and then replacing your solid fats with healthy fats like olive oil, using herbs and spices instead of salt to flavor foods. Drinking red wine in moderation, which is optional. Also, the Med way of living includes a lot of physical activity, enjoying meals, sharing meals with family and friends, and then limited amounts of sugar, particularly from sugar sweetened beverages and added sugars in the diet. What sets the Med way apart from other eating patterns? First of all, it's simple. Uses simple ingredients and simple food preparation techniques. It's delicious. Uses healthy fats, spices, herbs, aromatics to make food delicious and craveable. And not just delicious, but it's also really inviting with all the pretty colors, and it's satisfying. The Med way uses foods that promote satiety, like whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and healthy fats. So the 7 steps, again, we've gone through most of these, and you've seen these before. We are on step number 6, make your grains whole. Next week, we'll wrap up with rethink your sweets. So that'll be our last session next week. But these are, again, those 7 steps to eating the Med way. Today, we're going to talk about make your grains whole and how to choose whole grain foods such as oatmeal and quinoa and brown rice and popcorn, which is a great snack. One that we often don't think of as a whole grain, but it is a great snack. And when choosing bread and pasta, look for the word whole in the first ingredient on the ingredient list. We'll cover label reading later today. There's a lot of good information about label reading included in this particular session. Not all carbohydrates or carbs are created equal. This is a carbohydrate choice continuum, and it shows minimally processed carbs on the left as an important part of eating the Med way. So these minimally processed carbs include fruits, vegetables, and legumes. So lots of fruits and vegetables, legumes throughout the day. Choose those starchy vegetables like potatoes, peas, and corn less often than your other vegetables because they're not shown to have the same protective effects. Next, you have the unprocessed whole grains. try to eat grains as grains. Choose whole grains such as oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, popcorn, and bulgur. Eat unprocessed whole grains in combination with lots of fruits, vegetables, and legumes for a delicious midway combination. Lightly processed whole grains without added sugar would be next in this continuum. Choose these lightly processed whole grains such as rolled oats and whole grain pasta. And then foods made with whole grains and without added sugar. Here, choose 100% whole grain foods such as bread, crackers, cereals. Again, look for whole as that first ingredient on the ingredient list. And choose products that are made with minimal ingredients and minimal added sugar. Next, we have pasta with refined grains, and then also foods with refined grains. So if you're choosing these, what you can do is just eat smaller amounts of these and then add fruits and veggies, beans, other things that can give you some good fiber along with them. It's not that you shouldn't eat them, but to just maybe eat them in smaller quantities. And then at the very end, excuse me, of our continuum are foods and beverages high in added sugar. Eat and drink these rarely, and at most time, a few times a week. Need to beware because sometimes grain foods high in added sugar and saturated fat are also made with whole grains. And while most whole grain versions are slightly healthier than the refined grain version of the same food, a whole grain cookie is still a cookie. So save these types of treats for special occasions. There are claims that are prevalent in the popular press that have unjustly given all grains a bad rap. The best-selling books such as Grain Bin and Wheat Belly have popularized the concept that wheater grains are making us fat. These claims include that wheat today is different than in decades past, that wheat triggers diseases such as diabetes, Alzheimer's, depression, headaches, epilepsy, and ADHD, that wheat causes abdominal or belly fat, and that wheat makes the brain not function properly. Well, what's really going on is that we're eating too many refined grains. Almost 40% of the refined grains Americans eat is from yeast bread, such as hamburger buns and pizza crust. So what you eat really matters. And when you talk about whole versus refined grains. So eating lots of refined grains is associated with increased body fat. Eating at least 3 servings of whole grains a day is associated with decreased abdominal or belly fat. So the takeaway here is whole and refined grains are not the same when it comes to overweight and obesity. Americans eat approximately 7 ounces of grains per day, and less than 1 ounce on the average is a whole grain. So using slices of bread, this slide depicts the amount of refined versus whole grains that the average American eats on a daily basis. So the Medway recommendation here is make whole grains instead of refined grains the norm in your eating pattern. Well, what is a whole grain specifically, and what's a refined grain? Whole grains are grains that have the bran, endosperm, and the germ intact. This slide illustrates the majority of whole grains that are available in the American food supply. Whole wheat, oatmeal, brown rice are all examples of whole grains. Refined grains are grains that have the germ and bran, 2 of the most nutritious parts of the grain, removed. White bread, white rice, and products made with white flour are examples of refined grains or foods made with refined grains. So if you will just put in chat which whole grains that you've tried, if you tried any of these on this particular slide, which whole grains have you tried, or which whole grains do you like, and how you cooked them. And we'll just share with each other here. So put that in chat, whole grains you've tried, and then how you prepared them. Well, just a little bit of a warning here for buyer beware. Multi-grain may describe several whole grains or several refined grains or a mix of both. Label reading can be tricky in marketing. 100% wheat does not necessarily mean that the wheat is whole wheat. If it says it's made with whole grain, that doesn't mean that all of the grain in the food item is whole grain. It could mean that just some of the grain is whole grain. So beware of food products that contain whole grains, but that should still be eaten sparingly, like items that have high added sugar, saturated fat, or sodium. Just because it's whole grain, again, may not mean that it is a great food to eat. So how to identify whole grain products? First of all, you need to learn to read labels. Here's a side-by-side comparison. The image on the left is a whole grain product. And in the ingredient list, the first ingredient is whole wheat flour. The front of the packaging says 100% whole wheat. The image on the right is not a whole grain product. And the ingredient list, the first ingredient is enriched flour, and the front of the packaging says wheat. The midway eating tip here is to eat grains as grains, not foods made from grains. So to do that as much as you can, eat more bulgur, brown rice, and oatmeal, etc. Eat less bread and crackers. And when you do choose foods that are made from grains, like these bread and crackers, make sure you're getting those whole grain products. It can be really confusing to select bread and to go through and read all those food labels. And so this is a resource, which is one I'll put all of these links in the presentation. I'll put those in your Walk Kansas portal under resources. But this is an Eat Smart, Move More, Weigh Less blog post. And so you might want to take a look at that later. Here's a med flip to switch to whole grain products. We're going to explore this in regards to 3 categories of food. Those are oatmeal, pasta, and rice or whole grains. So let's take a few minutes to talk about each one of these. First of all, there are many types of oatmeal. And you all know that oatmeal is a really good choice to have. To start your day with oatmeal is a great thing, and to have it, other times throughout the day. It doesn't have to just be in the morning. But the different types of oatmeal and how you might use these are, first of all, steel cut or Irish oats. These are oat groats or oat grains that have been cut into little pieces. They're the least processed oatmeal. They take about 30 to 40 minutes to cook. They're the recommended choice for a breakfast cereal because it keeps you full longer. Next is old-fashioned or rolled oats. These are steel cut or Irish oats that have been steamed and then rolled flat. They're next in terms of processing after steel cut Irish oats. They take about 5 minutes to cook, and they're good for cooking and breakfast cereal. Quick cooking oats are steel cut oats that have been steamed, rolled even thinner than old-fashioned or rolled oats, and then cut into pieces. They take about 1 minute to cook, and they're good to use in recipes. And then instant oats. These are prepared or pre-cooked oatmeal that's been dried. And all you have to do is add boiling water to rehydrate. And this would be a good choice if you're traveling or you really need something that's very easy to prepare. Here's kind of an easy steel cut oats. It's kind of a midlife hack. If you think about the fact that it takes 30 to 40 minutes to cook steel cut oats and want to have those ready and ready to eat in the morning, you can prepare them the night before. You can take 4 cups of water, 1 cup of steel cut oats, and this will make about 4 servings. And then you bring it to a full boil, take the pot off the heat, cover it, and put it directly into your refrigerator and leave the pot in your refrigerator overnight. You can put a clean dish towel underneath to put in the pot and refrigerator to protect the refrigerator shelves. And then you'll have ready to eat steel cut oats in the morning. So this could help you just think a little bit further ahead, or you can prepare them in a slow cooker. And that's another option because it takes about 7 to 8 hours in a slow cooker. And you can Google for instructions, or I can put a link to some of the instructions in your portal as well, in your Walk Kansas portal. Another med flip and including this Medway recipe is to make your pancakes with oatmeal instead of flour. And his banana oatmeal pancakes recipe is simple and delicious. So it's one that you might want to try, and it uses oatmeal, bananas, and eggs. Next, let's talk about pasta. So switch to whole grain pasta, and there are lots of whole grain pasta products on the market now. You can find whole grain pasta in all types of the pasta varieties and shapes. If you're making the switch to whole grain pasta, if that's a challenge for your family, what you might do is to start out with half whole grain pasta, half regular pasta. It takes a little bit longer for the whole grain to cook. So what you might do is start out with cooking the whole grain pasta first, and then about 3 minutes after it's been cooking, add the regular pasta. That way you can start to ease your family over to whole grain, or at the very least, you'll at least be getting half of your grains as whole grains. You can eat less pasta and also bulk up your pasta with more vegetables. That's another option. In this recipe, whole wheat pasta with pesto and vegetables is a good illustration of that. And another med flip is featured here is for rice, to switch from white rice to brown rice or another whole grain. So you can pump up the amount of fruits and vegetables that you put in whole grains is another way to make that rice just have less rice and more fruits and vegetables. And there's several recipes here that are really good to try. The chicken and vegetable fried rice recipe, the curry quinoa salad, and the whole wheat couscous salad recipe are all great ones to try. Now let's take a look at mindful eating in the Medway. Mindful eating, or eating mindfully, means eating with awareness of what's on your plate, and also the entire eating experience. Mindful eating is being present in the moment and enjoying every aspect of the meal that you're eating. So I'm going to launch a poll here first of all, because we're going to now launch into talking about label reading. So if you would answer this question: when I shop for groceries, I read labels and then pick the one that best fits you. Okay, we've got about 60, about 70% of you participating here. It looks like there's about a third of you that always check labels, which is great. And most of the time so we have some pretty good label readers here. And then some of you just on sometimes. I'm really glad to see that there's no one that chose never. So that's good to know. So talking about label reading and mindful eating, label reading is one of the best ways to be mindful of exactly what you and your family are eating. Becoming a label reader will help you be mindful of the types of grains you're eating, whether they're whole or refined, and then reading labels will not only help you make your grains whole, but it'll assist you in identifying what those whole grain products are that are also low in sugar, saturated fat, or salt. One of the best ways to be mindful exactly what you and your family are eating, again, is to be that label reader. It helps you make the best choices, and the Food and Drug Administration requires that almost all packaged foods have a nutrition facts label. And small packages, manufacturers that have small production may be exempt from having the label, but almost always you'll see a nutrition facts label on the foods that you purchase. So that's really good news. The bad news is that the label can be confusing if you don't know what the items on the label mean. So we're going to take some time to learn to read the nutrition label. Again, it's a great tool. The new nutrition facts label, and when I say new, it was in 2016, the FDA approved changes to the nutrition facts label. And we'll kind of break these down here the next few slides, which are the talking points are color coded, and it's just for teaching purposes. You won't find color coding on the nutrition labels, but they are for these slides. But first of all, so what is on the label? What's different from the previous one? And you might see a few of the older labels still on some items, but very rarely. What's new on the label is servings per container and serving size. It's larger and a bolder type. It's updated serving sizes to reflect what people actually eat and drink today. And the calories are in a larger, bolder type. It has added sugars in grams and also has the percent daily value. That's all now required on the label. It includes or requires nutrients of vitamin D and potassium. The old labels also had vitamins A and C. Those are no longer required. And the actual amount is in addition to the percent daily value has to be listed for vitamin D and calcium, iron, and potassium. There's the footnote on the bottom that explains what this percent daily value really means. And basically, as you can see on the slide, it tells you how much a nutrient in a serving of food contributes to the daily diet if you are eating about 2,000 calories a day. So it's based on that 2,000 calorie per day amount. Excuse me. Serving sizes have gotten a reality check with the new label. I don't know if you've ever noticed on labels in the past, but sometimes those serving sizes were really kind of odd. They didn't really reflect what people were actually eating. And these have been updated to reflect that. For example, the serving size for ice cream used to be a half a cup. Now it's 2/3 cup. Packaging also affects servings. So there are some packages that may actually contain even 2 servings per package, but if they're going to be generally eaten as 1 serving, that's reflected in the label. For example, both 12 and 20-ounce bottles will equal 1 serving, since people will typically drink both sizes in 1 sitting. So let's look at those in the blue color here, the serving size and servings per container. So the serving sizes are used on the food label. They're standardized to help us compare similar foods to each other. So if you see what the amount of a serving size is for dry cereal, it's listed in cups. Excuse me. While serving size for crackers is listed as the number of crackers. Servings per container is especially helpful when looking at what appears to be a single serving container. Often what's sold as a single serving is actually 2 or more servings. Again, like a 16-ounce beverage may seem like a single serving, but it's actually only 1 if you read the label correctly. Next, let's look at, let's look at calories. Telling us how many calories are in each serving, not in the entire package, but in each serving. And using the nutrition facts label on this slide, if we ate 2 servings of this particular item, you would actually get 460 calories. So pay close attention to what the serving sizes are, and then how much, what's the serving size that you're actually eating. These particular items are ones that Americans typically eat in adequate amounts or even too much. So these are nutrients identified in yellow. Eating too much fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, or added sugar may increase your risk of certain chronic diseases like heart disease, some cancers, and high blood pressure. Total carbohydrates includes dietary fiber and sugar. Look for foods with higher amounts of fiber and lower amounts of added sugar. If the food's item is still on the old label, it won't list the added sugar separately from the total sugars. So just note that that's a new thing when it includes the added sugars. Americans need to make sure they get adequate dietary fiber, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium in their diets. And these are identified in blue. Eating enough of these nutrients can improve your health and help reduce the risk of some diseases. And here are the percent daily values. Again, these are based on the 2,000 calorie per day diet. This helps you determine if a serving of food is high or low in a nutrient. If the daily value is 5% or less, then the food is low in that nutrient. If the daily value is 20% or more, then the food is a good source of that nutrient. And the footnote, the bottom explains what that percent daily value is. Note that the footnote is standard. It doesn't change from product to product. The USDA My Plate website provides more information and tools about choosing healthy foods and recipes to meet recommended dietary needs. And so that's another link I'm going to put in your Walk Kansas portal. Next, let's talk about looking at the ingredient list. There's other information on the food label that can be helpful in making good decisions. And so always check the ingredient list. These ingredients are listed in order by weight of the ingredient in the food. So the ingredient that's listed first has the largest amount by weight. So you might want to look at the label. If the food is chunky chicken soup, if that was the last ingredient on the list, that's probably not a good option. And you wouldn't want to buy a cereal that has sugar as its first ingredient. So learn to compare those ingredient lists. We're going to look at two products here. The bread aisle, again, is one that can be really confusing for shoppers as there are lots and lots of choices. So take a good look at these two loaves of bread. They both look very similar. They cost about the same. And the dietary guidelines suggest that we choose those whole grains again. So we're looking on a whole grain option to purchase. Here are the ingredient lists. The first one, the one on the left, is a whole grain food because it has whole wheat flour as the first ingredient, and the one on the right has enriched flour. And this is another area where it can be really kind of tricky as well. The manufacturers may break up apart different kinds of sugar so that it doesn't appear as the first item on the list. So here you have sugar, molasses, and corn syrup, which are all sugars. And if they were grouped together in this product, they could have been the first item on that list based on the weight. And then beware of the front of packaging claims. So here on these Fruit Loops, it says that it's a good source of fiber and it's made with whole grain. And so that's the claim that they're making. But when you look at the nutrition facts label, you see that it contains some fiber, 2 grams or 8% daily value, but it's high in sugar. That's the first ingredient on the ingredients list after corn flour. So the 12 grams of sugar per serving all come from added sugars. So we want to limit those. And then another area that can be a little bit confusing for people are some of the regulated terms that you'll see on food items. So these are examples of different types of milk. And so not just milk, these are particular items that have either fat-free, low-fat, light, or reduced fat. And what those mean is fat-free. It's a product that contains no amount or only a trivial amount of fat, so less than 0.5 grams per serving. It may also say that it's without fat, no fat, non, or zero fat. And then if it's milk, it might say that it's skim milk. So that's the same as fat-free. Low-fat products are those that contain 3 grams of fat or less per serving. Light products are those that are nutritionally altered and contain 1/3 fewer calories or half the fat of the regular product. And then reduced fat is nutritionally altered and contains at least 25% less fat than the regular product would. So that gives you an idea of what some of those terms mean. So again, just redirecting you to the medinsteadofmeds.com. On the website, there are some videos there and lots of recipes that can help you as you look toward making your grains whole. And I'm going to turn it over to Christina as she reviews some of the recipes for this week.
So a couple weeks ago, we talked about the olive oil toast. And so sometimes when we think about increasing our whole grains, it could be intimidating and these big changes you have to make with your dietary intake. Olive oil toast is something that's very simple. As Sherilyn said, you switch out the brand of or the type of bread that you're purchasing to make sure it says 100% whole grain, or whole is that first ingredient. And this could be something that you could have with a salad. You could have as a snack. You could maybe perhaps put some Parmesan cheese or some garlic on there to have it alongside your entree. So something very easy you can do to bump that whole grain intake. Let's go to the next one. Perfect. So this next one is pasta with spinach and beans. And so Sherilyn talked a little bit earlier about what small changes you can make to increase the amount of fiber in our diet. But this one also gives you the opportunity, you're not going to consume as much pasta. As you're adding those beans in, it's going to give you a good source of fiber. The spinach is going to give you some more nutrients, and it's going to reduce the concentration of pasta on your plate, especially if you're trying to watch the carbohydrates from those whole grains. So again, you're getting more nutrients in your diet. It's an easy meal that you could prepare, and you could probably switch out these things as well. Try different beans, try different vegetables. I like that a lot of the recipes with Med instead of Meds, it gives you the option of utilizing your leftovers for different entrees. So that way you can repurpose your leftovers and not have the food waste. Okay, next one. Next one is my favorite, and this is for a couple reasons. If your mornings are like mine, it's kind of chaotic. Sometimes breakfast is the last thing on the list, and it's not something that we want to skip. So this banana oatmeal pancake recipe is something that you could easily double, make extra, keep them in the refrigerator, keep them in the freezer, and pull them out for those chaotic mornings. So your family is going to think you're treating them with this homemade breakfast. You don't have to tell them that you made it a couple days ago. It's perfectly fine. You could top this with a variety of things, maybe some pecans, maybe some fresh fruit. Gives you some options of switching it around, switching those ingredients. You can also utilize your leftover bananas. So if you're like me, at the end of the week, you always have that 1 or 2 stray bananas that nobody consumed. Rather than having that food waste, repurpose them. The browner they are, the better they work in this recipe, and the easier they are to smash. Okay, next. Simple stovetop popcorn. I think all these recipes fit along with our lifestyles and the busy chaos that sometimes our life can bring. This popcorn is something you can easily make for a snack or dessert. So if you're in the routine of every evening having a dessert, try fixing this popcorn. What I liked about this recipe is gave you different flavor options. So someone in your house may prefer savory popcorn. Someone may prefer sweet where you can add some cinnamon. Another thing is to make an extra amount, pack that first snack the next day. So 2:30 in the afternoon when you're needing a little something, you could pull out this whole grain popcorn and help you increase your whole grain intake for your next day. Next. Overnight oats is something that a couple people commented in the chat today. So this is another recipe. There's several options for overnight oats for Med instead of Meds. Again, it speaks to our chaotic routines, and sometimes you don't have the option of the time to fix a breakfast in the morning. Could be something you could prepare a couple ahead of time and have for your next morning. In addition, the recipe even suggests this could be something you could do for a snack if you need a little bit of that sweet tooth, or an evening dessert. And you can top it with a variety of things, whether it's a couple chocolate chips or some fresh fruit to increase your fruit intake. But there's several that are trying this with different fruit options. So I encourage you to try the chocolate version this week and report back next week on how you liked it. Next one is chicken and vegetable fried rice. This recipe is great because it encourages you to use your leftovers. Last week, we talked a little bit about meal prepping and cutting those vegetables ahead of time. You can throw whatever you have in here, whether it's onions or bell peppers, repurpose those leftovers, repurpose and try different proteins if you don't have chicken on hand. This could be something that's pretty versatile. You can have for leftovers the next day or pack for your lunch, but something that's probably going to be very kid-friendly as well. I imagine your family will really enjoy this. Next one. Whole wheat pasta with beans and greens. So again, this aligns kind of what Sherilyn was talking about earlier. Find ways to increase your vegetable intake when you're consuming those pastas. And so again, it spreads that pasta out. It's not quite as concentrated, so you're not getting as many carbohydrates. It's giving you the opportunity to punch more nutrients in that meal by adding your spinach and your onions and your tomatoes. This can be something you can make a little bit more convenient by using a canned tomato sauce. What I would recommend you to do is look at the labels on those sauces when you're buying them. Try to get something that's lower in added sugar, and also compare your sodium intake because those can be really high in sodium. Again, repurpose those leftovers, sneak them in those dishes that you maybe you're making on a regular basis. It also gives you the opportunity of gradually increasing whole grains. Your family is not going to see it if you're sneaking half your whole grains in this pasta dish. And then with time, they'll get used to it. And maybe you can try all whole grains in your next time you prepare it. Next, curry quinoa salad. This is something that can be light and fresh. I think about summertime and you're not wanting to heat up the house whenever you're preparing something. This is something that's pretty easy to prepare. Encourages you to add the dressing right before serving it. I can see putting this in small containers and taking this for your lunch. or have this alongside an entree. It has chopped mangoes and almonds and black beans. Again, it's kind of a creative way to be sneaking some of those new foods in our diet, but also it's light and fresh, so it's something that you can have this summer and getting protein and your fiber in with those beans and those almonds. And that's a variety of our recipes for today for whole grains. My recommendation is not to get yourself overwhelmed with having to swap out everything in your life. You go to the grocery store this week, try incorporating 2 more whole grains, whether it's buying popcorn for a snack, perhaps it's switching out your bread, or maybe it's buying some brown rice and switching that into some of your recipes that you're preparing. But those small changes, as your family adjusts to it, will make a big impact on your fiber you consume and also the nutrients in your diet.
Another thing I wanted to mention earlier, and I didn't, is that I know in the grocery store here in Manhattan, we have the option of choosing a white whole wheat bread. It's made with white whole wheat flour, and I've been successful in getting some young people in my home to enjoy that bread, and when they assured me that they won't eat whole wheat bread. And so you might look for that white whole wheat. You can also use white whole wheat flour in your baking, and you can not only white whole wheat flour, but you can also use whole wheat pastry flour and substitute that for any other flour, as long as you're leavening with, not with yeast. It doesn't work to leaven with yeast, but it does work for leavening with baking soda and baking powder. So try the whole wheat pastry flour and try white whole wheat flour. Those are options that seem to go over well with people that assure you they won't eat whole wheat. Christina, were you checking any questions that we had as we were going along? I don't know if there were any. While you're doing that, I'm just going to ask that you also respond to our survey. You can either click on the link here, copy the link, or the QR code. And we appreciate hearing from you from our Med Instead of Meds session today.
We did have a question regarding spinach pasta or different types of pasta. And the recommendation that I had is just pick up a whole grain and compare those labels. There's so many different varieties of pasta out there. If you look at the pasta shelves, there's just endless variety. So without knowing the exact variety you're purchasing, I don't want to lead you astray. But compare those items, get your whole grain and compare the fiber intake. And remember, as Sherilyn said, look at your ingredients and make sure it says whole grain somewhere on that label. If it's saying enriched, it shows you it might be more of a refined product, and we might be able to choose something that's a little bit higher in fiber. That was really all the suggestion or questions. We have a lot of people trying some recipes, which is really exciting. And it seems like there's really good feedback regarding that they like the recipes. So that's great.
Good. I might mention also that on the walkkansas.org website, there are newsletters there from the past 10 years of the program, and they all really follow the med way of eating, or this med instead of meds kind of concept. So if you want to look for more recipes there, those are all available, and other good information. So great. Somebody's going to switch from quick oats to steel cut oats. Wonderful. The steel cut oats really are filling. They're very good. Any other comments or questions? And if you, last week I was a little bit late in getting the recording put into the portal, so it should be there. If you don't see it, then let me know, because I put it out, everything up yesterday. So if you would take a look and make sure, and I'll get today's up hopefully by the end of the day today. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you. See you back next week.